This is my chosen poem to work with, Zong 1. W, 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 ah, wa, w, ah, w, ah, t, wa, s, our, wa, t, g, 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 go, o, oo, goo, d, w, ah, wa, wa, wo, wo, wa, ter, o, on, o, n, w, one, w, on, d, 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 a, d, a, day, a, s, one, days, wa, w, 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 a, w, wa, wa, t, wa, t, wat, water, of, aunt. Okay, so that was my long, slow reading of Zong 1. And so this, and part of my reading, is really thinking about all this blank space and what are these, part of it is emphasizing this like individual sound, but thinking about what's supposed to happen in that blank space. Like, is it supposed to slow my reading down as much as it did, or should I have read it faster? Right. And this is one thing with reading poetry out loud is, right, we have lines traditionally, like traditional poetry, we have lines, we have stanzas. But a lot of times when we read it, we want to like pause at the end of a line or pause at the stanza break and things like that. But when poets are reading it themselves, they just keep going at an even pace, and there isn't a pause there. And so then the other place to pause becomes punctuation, right? But in this case, we don't have stanzas, don't really have lines, don't have punctuation, but we have all of this blank white space. And so one question, like I'm asking about this poem that was reflected in the way that I chose to read it, is like, what is that blank space doing? Is it creating silence, like representing silence? So should I drag it out and have these long periods of silence when I'm reading it. The other thing is like once piecing it all together, we get water, we get good, we get was one day, at the end, the very last word is want. And so if this is like reflective of people who are maybe like extremely dehydrated, are they dying of thirst? And this is like right when your mouth is super dry and you're like trying to get the words out and right nothing will come, so that like extreme state of trying to do this as one possibility. Another possibility that's like reflected in this entire project, right, of these enslaved people aboard the Zong ship being thrown overboard alive, right? If they can't swim or they're drowning, is this like representative of them going up and down in the water, right? So when their like heads are breaking the surface, they're like trying to gasp, right, and say this, and then going under and then coming back up and going under. Another possibility is how many voices are here? Is this like one single person, or are there different people at each time like making these sounds, right? In terms of thinking about speaker behind this poem, is there a single speaker or are there multiple speakers? So like, let's say we were in a classroom setting and we were reading this poem together. What if like each of us was assigned a different like little piece in here, and we just like went around the room and each person, right, we'd have like all these different voices coming in and gasping with these sounds at different times in different ways. Right, so these are some things that I'm thinking about when I'm reading this poem. And I mean, the predominant sound here is the W that draws my attention. And thinking again, like the spacing, like visually, I really do think a lot about like the waves, right, and that sort of movement with water in this moment. So these are like some things that I'm thinking about as I'm reading this poem, and would want to incorporate into like a close reading analysis of this poem, like in writing form in an essay. So those are some of the ideas that I'm thinking about initially with this poem. And right, in terms of like doing a presentation and your own like presentations on your own poems, right, this is the goal, to just like talk through how you see it, and how you're kind of experiencing what's happening on the page and the thoughts you're having when you read the poem. And I mean, I don't have answers, right? I mean, understanding her project and stuff, but part of this project is we will all sort of like experience it the way we experience it, and it's not necessarily something that can be made clear sense of, right? And this goes back to that Morrison and languages like search or reach for the ineffable, right? The idea that language can actually not put into words some horrific events, right? And this being a very horrific event, right? Language is trying to give us the experience, but it really can't put into words. So with me engaging with this poem and thinking about like, what is the experience reading it? And my interest, I would really like to talk about the speaker/speakers in doing an analysis of this, and the way like I'm hearing voices. So that would really be like the direction I would go with a close reading paper and like that analysis of it. So those are my thoughts and my introduction to Zong via Zong 1. And I don't know, all of the Zong number poems are fascinating. And then the whole back half of the book that is doing a lot of very different things. But it is like asking these questions. So ask lots of questions, think about what your poem is doing, think of the varied possibilities for reading it, understanding it. What stands out the most to y'all?